Hey guys, how are you? My name's Mick and I am the proprietor and primary practitioner at Solace Wellbeing. I'm an acupuncturist, sports massage, remedial massage therapist. I'm also qualified Tai Chi, Qigong instructor and a meditation instructor, and I've more recently here in Australia trained in trauma release exercises. And so Connor at the Irish Australian Support and Resource Bureau, he got in touch with me today and asked me if I would contribute to a wellbeing program that they're putting together for us in these particularly stressful times. And so my plan for this video is just to kind of talk through a couple of the theories behind well-being and how to manage it with everything that's going on at the moment, and some of the techniques we can use. And what I'm primarily going to do is I'm going to engage some breathing exercises and explaining the kind of the science and the thinking behind why we do it and how it can be helpful. And so with that in mind, what I really want to do, and I'm just going to bring up a wee picture here that I'm going to work off. What I want to do is explain what we call polyvagal theory and how that works with the nervous system. Sorry, I'm just working here. How that works with our nervous system and how that responds to stress and anxiety and the role that they play in our overall well-being. Because ultimately stress and anxiety are not necessarily bad things. They're evolutionary functions of our being that are designed to help us to survive. You know, stress is a response to a stimulus that's a potential threat to our life, and so we activate all these resources within our body as a way of dealing with that potential threat. Anxiety as well is also an evolutionary thing, because it was actually going back, many thousands of years, when we were probably living on a savanna in Africa or wherever. Human beings that were anxious were more likely to survive. And the example that was given to me, and this comes from a great book, and I'd recommend checking this book out. It's, let me see, where are we here? It's called The Science of Mindfulness, and it's a research-based path to well-being. It's like a course in mindfulness. It gives you a lot of the science. It's by a guy called Ronald Siegel. Now, there's a cheat to this. I got this on Audible and I paid for it, but if you sign up for Audible you get one free book. I'd recommend getting this one because it's a whole course. It's, God knows, it's 20-30 hours long, so it's really good value, especially when you're not paying anything for it. I'd recommend that. But there's great resources in it about mindfulness and how to engage mindfulness. But I digress. One of the things he talks about in this particular course and in this book is how anxious humans stayed alive, or anxious kind of pre-humans, pre-Homo sapiens stayed alive. And the example he gives is, let's say you're walking in the bush and you happen to see something beige behind the bush. And you can make two mistakes in this situation. You can mistake that beige rock for a lion and you run away all anxious, in which case, you might look a bit stupid. The other mistake you could make is you could mistake that beige lion for a rock, in which case you could get eaten. So being anxious about things like that was actually an evolutionary advantage. Chances are our ancestors were quite anxious, which is why they stayed alive, and the happy-go-lucky human beings, historically, they got eaten by the lions. So anxiety in that sense was not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that we no longer have those kind of threats to our life anymore. It's not very often that we encounter a lion in the bush. So we no longer need that level of anxiety in our life. And the kind of stress and anxiety that we did engage was really designed for us to experience for maybe a minute, 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, as we were either fighting our aggressor or the predator, or else we were running away from it. And 5 minutes later, we were either safe or we were dinner. So we didn't need to keep that nervous system and all those resources active within ourselves for that long. Whereas now, well, we have stress and anxiety and all these things going on day after day after week after month after year. And it is utterly exhausting for our physiology, for our mental and emotional health to have all of this activated. And of course, with everything that's going on at the moment, we're all feeling stressed, we're all feeling anxious, and we're all feeling depressed about, what's happening and what's going on. But there are ways, we don't have to necessarily be governed by those things, because we have control, essentially, conscious control over our well-being, over the mind, body, spirit, and emotional body. And there are certain things we can do. And what I want to do is explain a little bit of what we call polyvagal theory. And again, I'm just going to bring this up here. Okay, so the vagus nerve is a nerve which runs through the body. It's secondary in size to the actual central nervous system, which runs down the spine. A lot of people don't realize there are nerves outside of the spine. And the vagus nerve, vagus means wanderer. It's a big nerve. Part of it runs down the front of our body, part of it runs down the back. It really connects in with the gut. And the really interesting thing is 80% of the communication along the vagus nerve travels from the actual body to the brain rather than the other way around. So we often think of the nervous system as being one-way traffic from the brain to the body, saying this is what you have to do, but a lot of it actually goes in the opposite direction. So the ventral vagal activation, that is very much linked to the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is what we call rest and digest. That's when you're feeling calm, you're feeling relaxed, you're feeling happy, everything's fine. And so you're resting, you're calm, and you're digesting, you're consuming your food, okay? There's certain emotions and states of being associated with this, like joy, being in the present, being very grounded, being curious and being open, being compassionate, and being mindful. So it's a sense of connection, it's a sense of feeling safe. And so we talk about rest and digest because your digestive system is working fine at the moment. There's no issues there. Your immune system is working fine because you can fight off potential pathogens and potential invaders in your system. Your reproductive system is working in this state. And so everything is going fine. Now, let's say you're walking through a forest and you're nice and happy, and you turn a corner and suddenly there's a tiger right there in front of you. Now, within a nanosecond, your body activates and your sympathetic response comes in, your fight or flight. You're either going to fight this predator or you're going to run away. And so when that happens, then suddenly there's an activation, there's an arousal of all this energy, all these resources in our body to deal with this. The two primary hormones or neurotransmitters we associate with this are adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline because you get that adrenaline hit, all the blood starts pumping, and cortisol. And what cortisol does is it shuts down your reproductive system. It shuts down your immune system. It shuts down your digestive system, because you don't need to be digesting food if you're about to be digested by something else. That's not a priority for you. Your immune system gets shut down because you don't need to fight off that virus right now, because that's not an immediate threat. The lion or tiger that's about to eat you, that's an immediate threat. So the virus that could kill you in 2 weeks' time, that's not such a big threat right now. That's way into the future. You may not even see that future, so that's no longer necessary. So the immune system is no longer functioning fully at this state because you're dealing with this immediate threat. The problem with our lifestyle and our society at the moment is our body doesn't know that it's not a lion that's causing the stress, that it's a difficult boss, or it's a stressful situation of dealing with coronavirus, or not knowing what's happening with your job or whether you're going to have a job. Your body doesn't know what the cause of the stress is. It just knows that you're stressed and responds accordingly. And as I say, rather than having this going on for just 5 minutes, it's going on for days and weeks and months. And it is exhausting in your body because you're not digesting food properly. If you're trying to have a baby, your reproductive system's not working properly and your immune system's not working properly. And of course, at the moment, we really want our immune systems working properly. So what happens in this state is, we have an increase in panic, in fear, in anxiety, in worry and in concern. These things are all starting to activate as a way of dealing with this stress and trying to find solutions to the threat. That's what its purpose is. Emotionally, we feel rage, we feel anger, we feel irritation and frustration. These are all the emotions that go along with this sympathetic activation, the activation of the fight or flight response. It increases our blood pressure, it increases our heart rate, it increases the fuel availability, so the energy coming in to our muscles, it increases adrenaline, as we say, increases oxygen circulation to vital organs. And what happens as well is you want to start getting oxygen pumping into the arms and legs, but it pulls it from other places then, because you want to be able to fight and run away, whatever the case may be. But then it's not getting into other parts of your body. So you start having issues in other parts of your body that aren't being nourished in the way they normally would. It decreases fuel storage. It decreases insulin activity. So you start to get a sensitivity to insulin, and it decreases your digestive process, as I say, decreases salivation. Now, because salivation is part of the digestive process, amylase in the saliva starts digesting starch, and so that's no longer happening anymore. And as we say, it reduces our immune response. So that's when that activation comes. Now, when that's going on for too long, you come into a next stage, which is the freeze state. And so the freeze state happens then when your body's just exhausted. It can no longer run away from that predator. It can no longer fight anymore. So you just shut down. And that's very much associated with the sense of depression or hopelessness. And it is also, it's a natural response to being in a threatening situation. If you can't get away from a predator, your body will shut down and play dead. Whether you like it or not is going to happen. But again, our body doesn't necessarily know that there's not an actual physical predator there, that this is just the way life is at the moment. So you have the activation of this freeze response, you have a sense of helplessness, conservation of energy, you have depression, numbness, dissociation, you feel shameful, you feel shut down, hopeless, and there's almost like a preparation for death. These are the activation of this freeze response, and so a lot of people will associate with these feelings. And this is why it's happening. It's a response to too much of this stress going on and you not being able to sustain it physically anymore. So your body is responding in this way, and that's why you may feel those feelings, and why we often get that when we've been stressed for so long. There's that sense you just can't sustain it any longer. So that's an explanation of what happens. Now what we need to do is, in order to get back down to that calm state again, that rest and digest, we have to come back down through activating that fight or flight response and getting back down to our baseline. So one of the things we can do is we can engage our breathing in a particular way, and the breath is actually very, very, very powerful. It's something we have conscious control over. Yes, it is an autonomic response. You don't have to think about breathing. It will happen naturally. But you can consciously engage it. Now, when we're feeling anxious and stressed, we tend to breathe quite shallow. There's three levels of breathing. There's clavicular, there's thoracic, and then there's diaphragmatic breathing, where you're breathing deep down into the abdomen. And that's ideally how we want to breathe, because we want to engage the diaphragm, because that is very much linked to that ventral vagal, that parasympathetic nervous system. And once you start engaging the diaphragm and breathing, then you start to engage that parasympathetic nervous system, and you start to down-regulate your nervous system. You start to relax, and you start to feel calmer. And so one thing you can do is to breathe deeply, but also breathing through the nose. And breathing through the nose naturally engages that diaphragm. Breathing through the nose also has a couple of other things. Now, some people breathe through the mouth, but the mouth is ideally for talking and for eating. The nose only has one purpose, breathing. So, I mean, in itself, that tells us what we're supposed to be breathing through is the nose. We also have a lot of hairs in the nose and a lot of little villi and little fibers, and they're designed to be the first part of our immune system. They're designed to trap any allergens, any pathogens coming in. And so if you breathe in pollen, or you breathe in some allergen, or you breathe in maybe COVID-19 virus, if it gets into the nose and the nose detects it and your immune system detects it, oftentimes you'll sneeze straight away to get it out immediately. So when you're sneezing, it's either because something is instantly just entered your nasal passage and your immune system's responding, or if you have a head cold, something that's just up here. When it gets past that, then it can get into the lungs and it become more of an issue. And when you're breathing through the mouth, that can happen easier because there's nothing there to trap any allergens, any pathogens coming into your body, whereas there is in the nose. The next stage then, as the breath is coming through, as it goes into the nasal cavity, and once it's in the nasal cavity, it activates nitric oxide. Now that's not nitrous oxide, that's not laughing gas I'm talking about that you get from the dentist. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator, and as a vasodilator, what it does is it opens up the blood vessels and stimulates the flow of blood. Breathing through the nose also slows down your breath. There's about a 50% resistance when you breathe through your nose as opposed to your mouth. And what that does is it means your breath is getting in slower. And you might think that's a bad thing, but what it does is you're already absorbing oxygen in your lungs when you're still breathing in, rather than getting it all in quickly and getting it out quickly. So there's actually an increased uptake of about 20% of oxygen. Each time you breathe, you're getting about 20% more oxygen through nasal breathing than you are through mouth breathing. And also, because it slows down your breath, normally people will breathe, say, about 16 times a minute. It brings it down to between 8 and 12 times a minute. Now, there's a thing in your brain called a pre-Botzinger complex, and that is a natural pacemaker, and it monitors the breath. And the pre-Botzinger complex is linked directly to the nervous system. And once the breath slows down, it then tells that pre-Botzinger complex that you're more relaxed, that everything's safe, and so it starts to disengage your fight or flight response. It starts to disengage that sympathetic nervous system and re-engage the parasympathetic rest and digest, and it down-regulates your nervous system, and your heart rate slows down, and you start to relax, and you start to feel better. And all that just through breathing through your nose because it's slower. So what you can do is, and there's a great breath you can do here, which helps in the case of when you're feeling down and depressed, and also when you're feeling overly anxious and stressed. And it's a very simple 4-4 breath. You just breathe in for 4 and breathe out for 4. And it has that great effect as if you're too high, it will bring you down to there. And if you're too low, it'll bring you up to here. Not too high, not too low. Just nice and regulated and calm and centered right there in the middle. And so if you want to give it a try, and I can just talk you through it right now. Very, very simple. Just get yourself into a comfortable position. And ideally you want to sit upright so your chest is open, expanded. Make sure your shoulders are relaxed. Make sure you relax your back. Relax your tailbone. Just sit upright. Just take a nice big deep breath in, breathe out, and then breathe in through the nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Continue breathing like that, but just note how you feel. Notice if you do feel more relaxed. Notice if you're feeling a bit up here, if you're a bit down here. Notice if you're feeling a little bit low, do you feel a little more uplifted now? It's a very simple breath, and it can be done anytime, and it literally takes 10 or 20 seconds of just engaging that, and it instantly starts to down-regulate the nervous system. Now, if you're having difficulty sleeping, that's another one that you can try. And what I find works really well in that situation is counting not just the number of the breath in and out, but also how many breaths you're doing. And ideally counting up to 10. And if you lose track of your count, going back to 1. So say breathing in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 1 breath. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 2 breaths. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 3 breaths, and so on. And what I find usually is by the time I get to 4 or 5, then I think, hang on, was that 4 or was that 5? And I lose count and I go back to the start again. And once I've done that 2 or 3 times when I'm lying in bed at night and I have difficulty sleeping, then my brain is like, here, I'm out of here. That's it. I can't focus on this anymore. And because it's like counting sheep, but it's a bit more involved than counting sheep. And so your brain is focused on something very simple. It's focused on the breath. And it's not thinking about anything else. All those other things that are going on, it can't think about those while it's trying to focus on this, because it takes quite a bit of concentration to count in and out and to count how many breaths you're doing at the same time. Might not seem like a lot, but when you're lying in bed, it really does help to bring the mind in, just focus on the moment, focus on the breath, forget about everything else, and just help you relax. So that's something you can try if you are feeling like you just need a way of dealing with the stress, the anxiety, everything else that's going on. Just simply breathing. Breathing is so powerful and something we have control over. You don't need anything else. Just engage the breath in that way. Now, if you're interested, I have a podcast called the More Than Wellness Podcast. It's on Facebook. It's also on my website, which is solacewellbeing.com.au, and it's / More Than Wellness. One of the guests I had on the podcast is Dr. Shami Barathan, who is an integrative GP based in Fitzroy. And we did a great podcast last year just about wellness and well-being and how to deal with stress. And she had some great insights on it. The other thing also that she really recommended is exercise. And exercise is so important for our well-being, particularly at the moment. You can't get to the gym, you can't do the things you normally do. Just getting out, even for a walk. Exercise really just gives you that dopamine hit, that reward hormone that just makes you feel good about yourself, that you've done something worthwhile, and it really makes a big difference. And another thing that somebody recommended to me as well at the moment is getting up and getting dressed in the morning. It makes such a big difference. Rather than hanging out in pajamas all day long, getting dressed just gives you that sense of purpose, that sense of doing something a bit more proactive, and as if you're still engaging with the day rather than just hanging out. So that podcast is More Than Wellness. My Facebook page for my business is Solace Wellbeing, and it's on Facebook. And so if you have any questions, if you want to know more about different breathing exercises or meditation and how it can help, just drop me a line, send me an instant message via Facebook, or you can contact me through the Irish Australian Support and Resource Bureau. And I really hope that this was helpful. And again, if I have left any questions, what I want to finish on is just to say that if anything I've said has triggered anything for you and you want to talk to somebody about it, again, you can get in touch with me as well through my Facebook page if you like. And also Beyond Blue is a great resource here in Australia for people who just need to talk about anything that's going on. So please feel free to get in touch there. All right, thanks for listening. Take care.